we now come to the Thursday phase of the sales call. So this is an area that can cause terror to the average salesperson. Objections are when customers have issues and problems with what we've just presented, and they come in all different varieties, shapes and forms, and it can often feel like the sale is all off. But actually, if you do the preceding sections really, really well, so you do your opening really, really well, you make your customer feel significant, but also you uncover their explicit needs, and you do an absolutely brilliant product presentation which answers all of their needs, and sometimes that's all that's needed and we can directly close. But often that's not the case. So let's have a quick look at objection handling and a specific method that is going to help you deal with objections and actually turn them into positives. So how do you feel when a customer fires an objection at you? I've had this question asked to me many times by clients when they say they feel quite emotional when somebody fires an objection. It's because they're doubting you. They don't believe what you're saying, or it's uncomfortable when you're being put under scrutiny by a customer. But what do you want to do to them naturally? So naturally what people want to do when when I've talked to clients about this, they say, I want to put them right. I want to tell them they're wrong. I want to tell them that that they haven't listened carefully to my presentation. They don't understand. So you want to put them right, and the anger might flash across your face, briefly. Or the opposite, you think, you give up, you're sad. You're finding you're getting objections all the time. You do your presentations, your pitches, and every single time you get to the moment of asking for the business and the customer gives you an objection. And it's a really, really disheartening thing when that happens. It knocks the chimp, your own emotional chimp, however mature you think you are. When somebody puts you under scrutiny and questions you, you suddenly get emotional. And it's unfortunately this part of the sales call when you can completely derail yourself. You could be so close to closing this deal right now. You are so close. You've done the hard work. You've done the really hard bits. Now we don't want the chimp to get involved and scupper us. So we're going to need to come up with some strategies for this. We're going to need to come up with some actual brilliant things that we can use as a tool to stop the chimp getting out of his box and muscling our logical, mature self into submission. So it is the riskiest part of the sales call, I have to say. This can happen right at the start of the sales call if you don't set your agenda. They fire an objection at you and that's it. It's game over from the very word go. Very, very risky. But there's good news, okay? So we're going to do an exercise in a second, but first and foremost, good news. Objections are not bad, okay? They're not all bad. They're actually a strong indicator that the buyer is thinking carefully about your offer. I mean, let's think about it. If we're in complex professional selling, you're not going to be asking for really simple things often. It might be asking for the next stage in a process, but we're not, we're often asking for multiple, things. We're asking for big projects to be delivered. And actually, an objection is a natural thing. You would expect that customer or that group of customers to have some questions to exactly how we're going to do this. So it's a good thing. It's a buying signal. It's what we call as a buying signal. Objections are not all bad. So the exercise for this is I want you to think about the most common objections you encounter. What are the things that you most commonly find your customers saying to you when they raise an objection, when you finish your pitch, or like I say, you might not be in sales right now, but have a think what you are likely to be presented with. And I'm sure we can all come up with the first one, the main one that jumps to people's minds in a second. So jot them down in the course booklet and then compare and contrast with what I'm about to go over. So types of objection. That's the other thing. We need to determine what type of objection we're dealing with. So using what you've just written down in the booklet, I want you to try and think about what type of objection each of those are. So doubt. The customer is skeptical about a feature or benefit that you can provide. So the customer is doubting you. They don't believe what you've just said. The proof that you've given them isn't strong enough for them to be convinced. It's quite a difficult one to deal with because this is one of the ones that's quite personal. This is generally when they don't have trust in you or they don't think you're an expert yet. So they're doubting you. So they're going to ask you a skeptical question. So tick next to which one of the objections you wrote down, tick which one you think is a doubting objection. Misconception, easier one to deal with. The customer thinks you can't provide something that you can. It's really common in sales. Customers aren't perfect at being customers. Often they get things wrong. Often they confuse what you are selling with a competitor. And this is a misconception. So you could derail your whole process that you've set up when in actual fact, if you look at it and analyze it correctly, they've just misinterpreted what you've said, and you could probably quite easily give them the correct answer and they'll be happy with that and they'll continue to buy. So this is why it's so important that we identify the different types of objection. A drawback, really, really common. Nobody has got a perfect product. That's right, including Apple. Apple, one of the biggest companies in the world, they produce brilliant products, but they all have drawbacks. So, the iPhone, for example, brilliant product, great product. We've all, I don't know if you have an iPhone. I particularly like the iPhone myself. Great product, ergonomically designed fantastically, but they still have screens which break so easily. It's so frustrating, and that's a drawback, but I still buy it. So it's a feature or benefit that you can't provide. And every single product you can think of that will have drawbacks. There will be things that you cannot provide and that your customer wants. However, it still doesn't mean that we can't deal with the objection. So in the course booklet, tick the relevant box for each type of objection, and then we're going to deal with how we deal with each one in a second. So I'm going to present to you the objection handling acronym. So you might be saying right now, Martyn, you told us earlier that acronyms aren't the best thing to represent things. Well, not unless they directly represent the thing we're trying to do. So this acronym, BLEND, and this is my tool for dealing with objections, but it's also a fantastic tool for dealing with any form of conflict resolution. So the B stands for be calm, the L stands for listen, the E for empathize, the N, never contradict, and the D, deal with the objection. So you can see here that it directly relates to how to deal with an objection. And I'm going to explain to you why each phase of this is so important. And what's really, really cool about this is at first you might think, well, yeah, I do this. But whenever we do this in practice, whenever we do this as a practical exercise on a training course face to face, we usually find that most people miss out at least 3 of the 5 elements of the blend process and jump straight into trying to put a customer right, which just gets their chimp narked and we get kicked out of the sale. So objection. Let's think of the actual roots of this blend method. Where did it come from? So I've been practicing Japanese martial arts for most of my life, not just Japanese martial arts, but other ones as well. But most recently, I've been practicing the Japanese martial art of Aikido. In fact, I'm a black belt in it. I've been training in it for 20 years, black belt from the Hombu Dojo in Tokyo. And, it's become a little bit of an obsession. And it struck me that dealing with objections is very, very similar to the way we deal with attacks in the martial art of Aikido. The martial art of Aikido, all martial arts are often badly represented, especially on things like YouTube. It's not what many people think it is, but this is relevant to how we deal with an objection. So in Aikido, you blend rather than clash. Whereas in karate, you clash rather than blend. I think at a higher level in karate, they do a bit of blending. And it comes from, the reason I've got a picture here of Kill Bill, the film Kill Bill by Tarantino, is we have a samurai sword on here. Now, Aikido is a samurai art, and it comes from the learnings of the samurai. And essentially, the point, to get to the point, is you cannot block a samurai sword. Okay, so if you try and block a samurai sword, either with your arm or anything, you will get horribly cut. The samurai sword is ridiculously sharp. The Japanese are particularly proud of the fact of the way they fold the metal on a samurai sword. They're razor sharp, but they're extremely strong. And one of the things they were very proud of is when the Portuguese were at their mightiest. The Portuguese warriors, the Portuguese men of war, when they first landed on Japan to try and invade, the Japanese samurai would be able to slice through the helmet with the samurai sword in one blow. So as we saw, that the Portuguese men of war's helmets did not provide them any protection because they were trying to block with the helmet rather than blend. So what do we know? If you clash with a samurai sword, you'll get horribly cut. But if you clash with a customer when they have an objection or a complaint or any form of conflict, you will lose because you are not in a position. Think of your customer's objection or complaint or whatever as being as sharp as a samurai sword. You will lose if you block it and try and put someone right. So how do you blend? You agree. So the most important thing when you're dealing with a samurai sword is when the person attacks you, when they do that downward cut to your head to try and chop your head off or chop you in two, you need to move out of the way. You do not block it, because if you get in the way, you're going to get it. Agreeing is the same thing. If you have agreement when someone fires an objection at you, you are going to find that you're going to get out of the way of that blade. It disarms that person so quickly. Or at least make it look like you're agreeing with your customer. So I'm not necessarily saying to you right now that you need to agree with all the negative things or even take the position that the person is taking with you if you're in a dispute with you. You don't have to say anything negative. You just have to agree. The form of agreement we're doing is we're agreeing that we understand where they're coming from. We understand where this sword is coming from. We're being calm. I'm going to come on to that in a second. We're listening carefully to it. We understand why it's arisen, and you can agree with that customer. But never. The one thing I would say to you, never, and this is a form of not interrupting them, is never use the word but when dealing with an objection. So you can agree with somebody, say, I can see where you're coming from. That's really, really important. And then you say, but what we have to offer, a but is a clash. And any other gestures, expressions, body language, anything that confers to your customer that to begin with, you've agreed with them. So that to begin with, you've said, I agree with you. And now all of a sudden you're saying, but, or you're making a face, or you're making a little noise or whatever it is that shows that actually you didn't agree with them in the first place. You're right back to square one. You will give your customer another opportunity to attack you again, which is the same as when we are attacked with a samurai sword. If you move too early, you don't make sure you get off the line of attack. You look carefully at where the sword's coming from. You empathise by agreeing. And you re-spook them. They get a chance to step backwards, take the sword up and attack you once more. Now we are in a position to cure the objection. Another acronym, an acronym that I've borrowed from some training that I went on about 20 years ago. So you've blended with your customer. So you're being calm. You've listened carefully to what they've been saying. You've empathized with them by agreeing with them. You've not interrupted them. And now it's time to deal with the objection. And this is when we come to cure. So cure stands for clarify, understand, restate, explain. So once you've blended and you've agreed and you've heard what's been said and you've listened carefully, you clarify with the person that that's the case. You repeat back to them when it comes to restate in a moment. You clarify to make sure that you understand what type of objection you're dealing with and that you've understood them. So understood for the U for understand. You understand the customer and then you restate using the same language back to that customer in a slightly different format. And then you're in a position to explain why the objection isn't a problem. So, clarify, what is the nature of the objection? Ask the customer to explain the objection. Ask them to explain it to you. Then repeat back the objection to them using the same words but subtly rephrased. Now you can give your answer, but not before you've blended and then you've cured. Do you explain? Because if you go straight into explaining, you're clashing, you'll get your customers back up and you will lose. So, how do you outweigh objections? So let's go back to the wider customers buy. Because this is the critical bit, remember, of this sales call. We're so close to closing. And suddenly they've got some objections which may weigh this scale down to no sale. So how do we make sure that whatever objections we've got are outweighed? We put their chimp, the emotional side, the significant side, the urgency, the scarcity, the fear of missing out, we pop that back into the equation. So yes, Mr. Customer, I may well have a drawback of my product. My screens on my iPhone are really fragile and break all the time. However, my phone makes you look cool and successful and makes you look significant. Suddenly, that tips the scale, and all of those objections seem now as if they weren't important in the first place. So let's summarize the objection handling part of the sales call. Objections can be avoided in the first place by building explicit needs up front. So if we do the Monday part, making them feel significant, we do the Tuesday part of the phase of the call, where we find out exactly what they want and build these needs, and we present to them linked directly to those needs, hopefully we won't get many objections. Hopefully we will circumvent that whole thing. But remember, don't be spooked by an objection. An objection is often a sign that a customer is thinking carefully about your offer, okay? Get on side with your customer by blending. Use that blend method. So you can go and look up Aikido a little bit more and look at the way they deal with attacks. So I want you to think carefully about being calm, listening carefully to your customer, empathizing by agreeing with them, never interrupting them or contradicting them, and then you deal with the objection. And then we can cure the objection. We clarify what it is, we show that we understand, we rephrase it using their same language, and then we can explain. And this is how we tip the scale with emotional needs. So we explain to them, once we've gone through this process, that actually your emotional needs are more important than any of the objections that you've just raised.